This episode is brought to you by Infuse, where agility meets scale, where compliance meets confidence, and where bold ideas become reality. Find the only place where card issuing and processing comes with happiness built in. The Infuse modular next-generation platform gives you exactly what you need, from bin sponsorship and scheme access to compliance and fraud prevention, while you stay in control of your customer experience and roadmap. Infuse, innovative card issuing and processing that fuels innovation. Discover more at infuse.com. Does moving money across borders feel scary? This episode of FinTech Insider is brought to you by 3S Money, a fintech scale-up that makes global payments simple, predictable, and human. With 3S Money, your business gets multi-currency accounts and local IBANs, enabling you to send and receive payments in all major currencies, reaching the widest possible range of destinations. You'll also have a dedicated account manager, a real person, not a chatbot, guiding you through every step of the way. Enjoy the best FX rates, fully transparent fees, and premium service backed by regulation you can trust in the UK, Luxembourg, UAE, and Hong Kong. Go global with confidence. Open your account today at 3s.money and find out more. Hello everyone, and welcome to FinTech Insider. I'm David Barton-Grimley, and this week we have something a little different for you. I recently attended the very first Money 2020 Middle East in Saudi Arabia. Beyond enjoying endless cups of Arab coffee and picking up an impressive stash of free swag, which I somehow had to get back to the UK, I was genuinely inspired by the region's startup ecosystem. The energy, innovation, and ambition were palpable. And it's not just in Saudi, it's across the entire region. I got to meet people from Egypt, from Jordan, from the UAE, all over the area. It's extremely dynamic. And in the next few weeks, we'll have a very special episode coming up where David Brer will be chatting to some of the winners of the Money Surge Startup Competition, which he helped judge out in Saudi. But in the meantime, to give you a little taster and a deeper insight into this dynamic market, we are revisiting an episode we recorded a year ago that still holds true today. In it, our host Benjamin Ensor is joined by industry experts Gaia Lamperti, Ziad Mabsout, and Remo Abbondandolo to discuss the challenges and opportunities for fintechs launching in the Middle East. Whether you're thinking about expansion or just curious about the region's fintech landscape, this episode offers plenty of valuable perspectives. Enjoy the listen.
In this episode, we're discussing expansion into the Middle East. Imagine, and if you're listening to this podcast, you might not need to imagine, that you're the founder of a successful fintech. You're doing well in your home market, and you're weighing up your options of where to expand next. Well, how about the Middle East? As rumours swirl that two of the biggest digital banks, Nubank and Revolut, are aiming to replicate their successes in Latin America and Europe in the Middle East, we want to dive into the opportunities and challenges of doing so. A small disclaimer before we start. The Middle East and the wider Middle East and North Africa region is a huge, diverse area with many nuances, many cultures. We're going to try and cover as many of these countries as we can, but please forgive us if we struggle to fit everything into a 40-minute podcast and don't touch on all of the wonderful diversity of such a huge region. But to find out more about the whys and hows of launching in the Middle East, I'm joined by a fantastic panel of 3 guests. First up, we have a warm welcome back to FinTech Insider for Gaia Lamperti, Middle East producer at Bloomberg. Welcome back to the show, Gaia. How have you been since you last joined us?
Thank you, Benjamin. It's great to be back. I've been good, thank you. And actually, since we last joined, I moved to the Middle East. I'm now based in Dubai, which is where I'm joining you from today. So yeah, glad to be here.
And what does a producer do at Bloomberg for people who are not quite clear on the roles within a media company?
Of course. So I'm a TV producer, which means we have a daily show to put on air every day. Little promotional segment, 8 a.m. Gulf Standard Time in Dubai. So we basically make sure the rundown has the most pregnant stories for the region in shape. We make sure we have interesting guests who deliver some analysis and opinions, and that we are on the field when needed to report from the ground across the GCC.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. And next up, we have a FinTech Insider debut for Ziad Mabsout, co-founder and head of distribution at Venray. Welcome to the show, Ziad. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what about Venray and what you do there, please?
Sure. Thank you, Benjamin, for having me, and pleasure to join the rest of the panel. So I'm a co-founder and head of distribution at Venray. Venray is a wealth creation platform that aims to unlock financial freedom for the Henrys of the MENA region. We call them Henrys, or the high earners not rich yet, of this MENA region. And as a background, I spent most of my career on the buy side, servicing family office on the investment management. And me and my co-founders saw a huge gap in the offering for this segment that we belong to. So we came to UK to set up our first shop. And then we'll probably speak about the expansion. Then we head back to Saudi Arabia to expand in the region.
Fantastic. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we also have another FinTech Insider debut for Remo Abbondandolo, who is General Manager and Vice President of the Middle East and North Africa at Checkout.com. Hopefully most of our listeners have heard of Checkout.com, but perhaps you can give them a quick overview of the company and your role there, please, Remo.
Sure, Benjamin. Thanks for having me here. I'm the GM of Checkout.com, based in Dubai, looking after our Middle East business. For those who don't know yet, Checkout.com, we are a global digital payment company that delivers high-performance payment solution for enterprises scaling business. We're very focused on digital, and we partner with some of the world's largest e-commerce business. They need online payment presence. And thanks to our ability to serve e-commerce business globally and obviously in the region, we are able to help company to expand. We've been in the MENA region since over 10 years, so it's a part of the world we know very well. Although our company is UK-based, London is our head office. It's a part of the world we know very well, and we are very happy that we'll be able to support many global merchants in expanding in the region.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to all three of you. Okay, let's dive in. So to kick off the show, let's start with some of the things that make the Middle East an appealing place to be for fintechs. Gaia, I think I'm going to come to you first with a very big question. For listeners who are perhaps a little bit less familiar with the region, how would you describe the current sort of landscape of fintech in the Middle East? Are fintechs doing well? Are fintechs struggling? Are there certain sectors where fintechs are sort of really taking off? Can you give people from outside the region just a little bit of a flavor of sort of what's happening in fintech?
Of course, gladly. I'd say, first of all, maybe let's put some numbers to it. This year in 2024, the fintech market size in MENA, so Middle East and North Africa, has been estimated at $1.5 billion. This is data coming from PwC, but is also expected to top $2.4 billion by 2029, which means it's definitely an expansion. And that is inevitably disrupting the traditional financial landscape. I would say this penetrates both the public and private sector in this region, which is an important annotation to make, because the backing from the sort of government and the public landscape really helps the growth of this segment. And I think, mainly this is due to the region's very swift embrace of technology, and at the same time to a huge potential for growth. If we look at the number of consumers, like the percentage of consumers in the Middle East who use digital banking, that's only at 17%, according to IMF data, which compared to a 60% in the States means there's definitely an opportunity there for tech companies to sort of fill in the gap. And then if we look at different markets, Turkey is probably the one with the highest number of fintech companies, but it's closely followed by the UAE and Israel, and these are some of the more mature markets. As you mentioned in your intro, Benjamin, even UK fintech giant Revolut is eyeing the UAE for a potential license to operate in this country. But particularly Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt are emerging. So I think these are the markets to keep an eye on because they're quickly becoming the epicenter of fintech funding. And Saudi Arabia, more than any other, is setting 2030 as a goal year to sort of like boost, fuel its fintech unicorn scene as part of a bigger program to expand its economy on the tech front. So yeah, I think there's a lot to look out for, and these were just a few inputs ahead of the conversation that will follow.
Fantastic, thank you. Ziad, do you agree with sort of Gaia's assessment? And as you think about the sort of markets across the Middle East, do you see particular products or particular markets that are really being driven forward by fintech? Do you see areas of great opportunity? I mean, obviously you talked about your own opportunity, but do you see other areas that are doing really, really well?
So I think what Gaia has mentioned is obviously the macro overview about the fintech in the MENA region, and as well, I would second you and what Gaia said. MENA region is a huge region in terms, and it's different. So GCC is completely different from the Levant area, from Turkey, from Egypt, North Africa. We cannot treat them the same. And me being as well Lebanese, you could think that, okay, I can easily land in Egypt and navigate. Probably I have an advantage versus other people because I have a cultural interaction, but it's not the same. It's not one region that we look at it in one place. Obviously, in the GCC, the geopolitics and the macroeconomic plays a role. What's happening in Turkey versus Egypt on the currency side versus what's happening in the GCC. GCC represents now the most attractive place to be in. And at least from our perspective, we are in the business of wealth tech. So a sub category from fintech, a wealth tech, so focus on the wealth solutions. So we see GCC is a top target for us, but as well Turkey and Egypt has a huge opportunity. And this is where the offering in the fintech products could help. Like you penetrate first in digital banks, then you facilitate payments, probably what other platforms are doing, and then eventually you get to wealth management and other platforms. So this is my kind of overview. Obviously in the GCC, Saudi Arabia is the biggest market. UAE is very diverse, has its own special advantage, but Saudi Arabia is the biggest population. It has a local population. Bahrain is advanced, Qatar is advanced, but it all depends on size.
Remo, how do you think about the sort of region as a whole? I mean, when Checkout.com was first expanding into the region, which markets did you go for first? Which customer groups? Which countries? How do you sort of think about such a complex and diverse region when you're sort of taking decisions on what to prioritize or where you're trying to grow?
When we look at the region 10 years ago, it was quite evident that there was like a massive opportunity in terms of growth when it comes to e-commerce, specifically digital payments. Because first of all, you could see the market was moving towards the right direction. There was a lot of growth. There were like more e-commerce coming up. Fintech was still like almost inexisting at that point. Gaia shared a lot of good numbers about what we see right now was even smaller back in the days. And the second thing we saw, the adoption of digital payment was very low. Cash on delivery was by far the predominant payment method in most of these countries. And obviously, we see the opportunity that a lot of companies were going digital first, and obviously you want to make sure that you adopt digital payments. I also agree with Zaid when it comes to the fragmentation of the region, because Middle East is like a big part of the world. We as a Checkout, we process payments in multiple countries around the GCC. We do Jordan, we do Egypt, we go as far as Pakistan as well. But ultimately, if we look at the biggest countries, is UAE and Saudi. And that's where we at Checkout.com, we spend most of our energy. We decided to set up the office in Dubai 10 years ago. And I think it was a good choice because at that point, the infrastructure obviously was ready to enable a lot of companies to expand easily, and also local homegrown company to expand as well. But we also realized very quickly how Saudi was growing, and obviously the biggest country in terms of population in the GCC. And we saw the transformation which was happening in the kingdom. We decided 7-8 years ago to set up also office in Saudi, and now we have a presence not only in Dubai but also in Riyadh, where we serve both the two biggest countries. The others, they have opportunity, but again, it goes back to the previous point that Ziad mentioned, also goes in terms of the population, in terms of the opportunities. So we definitely see more and more Saudi coming up as an emerging player in the region. And also we can see we keep helping a lot of global companies to expand in Saudi. Yet UAE has been perhaps more advanced specifically when it comes to fintech and adoption of digital wallets, digital banks, which is still very low compared to the Western world, but definitely growing very fast. I want to conclude by saying that also we know that in the region, sometimes things happen a bit late and catching up, like the adoption of cash and delivery digital payments, as I mentioned before. But then when things moves very quickly. If you look at some of the data on the digital transformation report that we publish in Checkout every year, you can see this is 2020. We see a 658% growth in terms of volume that we've been processing. And only last year has been 78%, which also is an indication there's not necessarily COVID that accelerated the digital adoption, but was a trend that was already happening. And since 2020, when we did the research until now, 80% of consumers shop more at least once per day online. So clearly you can see that they are moving very, very fast.
Wow, that's impressive growth. Gaia, I'd love to bring you back in on thinking about whether there are sort of untapped opportunities. Because if we think about the region, not only is there diversity, but there's a lot of sort of income inequality between countries. There's some wealthy countries and some not so wealthy countries. And then within each country, there are some wealthy people and some not so wealthy people. And that income inequality is greater in some markets than others. Is there a lot of opportunity to help some of the sort of underbanked, unbanked segments? Are you seeing sort of fintechs trying to help those segments of the population in some of the markets that you're covering?
100%. I totally agree, Benjamin. It's a very diverse market. I think both Ziad and Remo mentioned this already. Many think about, the GCC as sort of the mecca for high net worth individuals. But we also have to remember it's a super attractive market for expats from everywhere with very different backgrounds and very different needs in terms of moving money and setting up businesses or payments needs. And at the same time, if we look beyond the GCC, as Ziad very nicely specified, MENA incorporates North Africa, which has a completely different level of banking penetration and access to, legacy institutions and the Levantine region. So I think you really made an interesting point by which this sort of demographic that this region has, it's key for fintech to grow. We mentioned different levels of access to banking. We mentioned population that comes from different part of the world and may need to move capital and may prefer to use fintechs and other platforms that do that more fastly, costly efficiently, and in a more tech advanced way. But there's also an element of young population as well. It's the Middle East and North Africa. It's home to almost 140 million young people, which means usually below the age of 25, and that means that the digitization rate is much faster. They get it much faster, and certain fintechs, especially the whole sort of buy now, pay later solution landscape, it's way more attractive for a younger population. So I think there are quite a few elements to consider, and putting them all together obviously creates a very fertile terrain for fintechs to thrive.
It's easy to forget the youth of some of these countries. Ziad, you were talking earlier about the sort of high income, not rich yet, and presumably those are younger customers because if you think about it, you sort of think, well, there've been wealthy people in the Middle East for a long time. Surely those wealthy people are being well served. But you're saying no. Actually, there's an opportunity here to serve, particularly perhaps younger people in the Middle East region, who are not today getting the services that perhaps they deserve and want. Is that?
Yeah, correct. If you want to as well look at certain numbers, in one of the latest reports for the BCG spoke about the wealth growth in the GCC. It's expected to move to $3.5 trillion by 2027. This obviously by itself is an opportunity because this wealth is distributed among ultra high net worth individuals, And this is very private banking terminology, ultra high net worth individuals or high net worth individuals. But
Stupidly rich people, I call them.
Let's not be judgmental. We don't know what happened.
That's not judgmental. It's just they're just lucky.
But let's being frank, those could be coming from second generation or third generation family business established for a long time. But the high net worth individuals, and what is more attractive and interesting, is the lower wealth segment. So you have the mass and you have that segment in the middle that we call them Henrys. They are high earners. They could be expats, as Gaia mentioned. The expats communities are growing in those countries, and they could be local. Think of founders of many ventures or people who worked for Careem at the first 20 employees of Careem. Those people became Henrys at a certain point, and this is where we've seen the opportunity of being unbanked. We're using the terminology unbanked. They could be banked, but they are not properly served what is equivalent of a private banking services for this segment. And usually the UBS of the world and those kind of private banks, they target the high net worth individuals and the ultra high net worth individuals, but they miss that segment that we are identifying. So this is massive opportunity. You have the second point that is very important: legislation. Not only that, in the vision of 2030, Saudi Arabia is aiming to push the saving ratio among the Saudi nationals because it's really low now. You have the second issue is around pension. This region is not familiar or is not established where you have a pension system. Then you can work throughout your career. You are a partner at the top consulting or a executive at a company, and then you say, I have my pension. No, you have to work for your retirement in a certain way. And that by itself is an opportunity because, for example, here, which is a different landscape to UK, if you want to compare it to London or UK, you have pension system, you've got fintechs that solve problem to aggregate your pension in one place, like many of them, but there you don't have that opportunity. So there is the unbanked or unserviced segment, and this is where we got focused on that. We saw this is a massive opportunity. Okay, what about those who are high earners, not rich yet? They have a certain lifestyle, but they cannot sustain it with the current wealth bracket. So and as per the BCG report, the individuals will be one of the highest contributors to this wealth growth in by 2027 in GCC.
Thank you for mentioning regulation and legislation, because I wanted to move on to that. And Remo, I mean, obviously the governments in the region are not blind to the growth of fintech and so on. How important is the support from governments in sort of Abu Dhabi or Qatar or Saudi Arabia? How helpful are government regulatory initiatives? And are there sort of countries that are standing out because of the extent to which they're supporting fintech, whereas maybe there's other markets where you just wish there was a regulation around, I don't know, electronic signatures or something that's, holding businesses back?
Definitely positive and definitely very important. Because if you look at what's happening in the UAE specifically, we noticed that in the last couple of years, the regulators and multiple players in the ecosystem, they really open up and accommodate more fintech in the individual ecosystem. Just by thinking the fact that, Checkout.com was the first international company who got the payment license last year. It's an element that, showcase that, there is more opening when it comes to attracting foreign companies to come to the country, and the amount of local players they've been regulated both in the UAE and Saudi is also, the list is very long essentially. So the regulators definitely accommodating more, and they're working towards the right direction to make sure that they can attract more and more businesses in specifically in the fintech ecosystem. Ziad spoke a lot about investment trading platforms. Definitely more. We see more and more at Checkout.com. We process for a lot of them already locally. We see more global players coming into the region. It's also interesting that if you go to if you come to Dubai and you go on Sheikh Zayed Road, the main road, you can see how much offline marketing some of these players are doing, which is definitely also showing there is like a good push, a good interest, also for the population. But one thing I also want to share by looking at the data, without spoiling too much, the report we will publish next year. This year, we saw an increase of digital remittance in the region. You probably are not surprised if you look at the top 3 countries in the world in terms of remittance. 2 of them are in the region, which is Saudi and UAE. But most of them, they actually moved from offline to online. And we've been seeing an incredible growth, talking about also the unbanked and people that not necessarily might transact online. So a lot of consumers not necessarily use the digital cards to buy a product that service online, but they start to use digital services and fintech to send money back home. And this is an interesting trend that we picked up this year. We have noticed an exponential increase in the UAE, but very quickly in Saudi. We can see a couple of local fintech, which they are literally growing double digits month over month, which they're extremely strong. Companies such as Tikmo in Saudi, they started less than 1 year ago, and they already have double-digit growth on a monthly basis. You have companies such as Karim, which kind of almost changed the business model, became a super app where Karim Pay became like a central part of the business model, which obviously also helped also the unbanked from that perspective. And then you have the Western Union, TapTapSend, all these big players, they're also coming in. So definitely we see this line of business growing quite a bit. And on your question is also because the regulators, they are making easier to make sure that people in a compliant way, they can actually help to the development of the digital landscape.
Thank you. Gaia, last question in this section, and for you, because we're running out of time in this section. How are governments sort of across the region sort of balancing the need to encourage sort of foreign investment, encourage foreign talent, encourage great people from either within the region or from outside the region to come and set up fintechs and so on in their country, with the need also to sort of protect and encourage their own citizens and, try and make sure there are jobs for their citizens, because you don't just want foreigners, you want locals to get jobs and to gain skills and so on. How are sort of different governments trying to balance that?
Of course. I think the balance is yet to be struck. Definitely, even just look at the UAE, the number of expats is well beyond the number of local Emiratis. So it's still, especially in the fintech scene, not there yet, but you can see that changing quite a lot. Saudi Arabia is a prime example for that. It used to be much easier to sort of like eat a piece of the cake from Saudi Arabia, be able to do business. This is even beyond financial technology. It was much easier a few years back to be able to interact with Saudi Arabia as a partner, as a client. And now I think the requirements from the government in order to expand your business in Saudi Arabia are changing quite drastically. You do need to set up a local office. Oftentimes you need to abide by certain local laws by which there are quotas for hiring staff that is local. And I think, obviously this is only fair. It fosters talent locally. And I think obviously these are countries where finding capital is quite easy because of the concentration of family offices, because of sovereign wealth funds. And I think, it's fair for companies to set up or expand, but also interact directly with the local talent. And you can see that from the bottom up also in terms of like education programs and interest in new technology, especially in Dubai. There are more and more academies opening that are focusing on, for example, AI, which is the new frontier actually of competition within the GCC. Just to mention one, there is the Future Foundation in Dubai that it's constantly sort of training local young professionals to hit what is now a global market and have very specific, very technical skills. So I think it's still a work in progress. It's still not so close to be reached, but it's drastically changing. And I think it's something that the companies that are now looking into expanding their business, relocating, setting up offices locally need to take into account, and probably are already starting to take into account.
Thank you. Okay, we're just going to take a quick pause before we dive into how to launch in the Middle East, which is coming up just after this quick break.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 125,000 bonus miles for a limited time through October 29th. The Delta Sky Miles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends October 29th, 2025.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to FinTech Insider Insights, where we're talking about expanding into the Middle East. In the first half of the show, we talked about the booming FinTech landscape across the wide and diverse region. In the second half, we're going to discuss the things founders and chief executives need to know before they look to grow their business there. So I'm going to start with the question of, well, where do you build a base in the Middle East? Ziad, I'm going to come to you first. Because if you look at population, Egypt, Turkey, these are the biggest countries, and yet Cairo is not necessarily the hub. How do you think about which markets to start in? You've chosen Saudi Arabia, I believe. Should you go about thinking about which of these markets are potentially most attractive?
Yeah. So if we want to be fair and honest, this is a difficult decision to be made, and it differs where is your stage of the business that you are in. So, for example, Revolut has 40 million users. When they want to think of where to expand, they will have different consideration versus vendor. We are a small startup. We were just about to start, and we just want to pick it up quickly. For us, we made the decision. We looked at different considerations. Doing business, where's the biggest gap in the region? Where can we put our footprint, and where do we have an advantage, for example? So, for example, for us, we had an advantage. We have a local co-founder as well who joined us and joined the effort. That was in Saudi Arabia, was a different consideration. We had people who backed the business from day one who are local as well. And they doubled down on the thinking of why this is a solution for the local market. From our perspective, honestly, we saw it good time ago before now people speaking more and more about Saudi Arabia. So when we started the journey around the end of December, we said the next one after UK set up and London and so on would be Saudi Arabia for the region. And honestly, I want to tap into the Saudi Arabia market. You have really to embrace the local culture and the national population. And you need to want to build a solution for them. It's completely different than just going in to, I will use the word of Gaia, to take a piece of the pie and get out. This is wrong and this won't work. Yeah. And if you approach it this way, don't go there. My advice is just cut your journey and don't go there. You have to go there from perspective. You want to really build a solution for the local population. And that was really exciting comparing to UAE, for example, or other countries. We plan on expanding in a second office as well. We haven't announced it yet, honestly speaking. And some people say by conclusion it could be that country or this country. No, we're doing it differently. But this is where we see the pickup in the last year and the funding and in the adoption of technology, the young population, the high adoption rate of tech, and is very attractive in Saudi Arabia, and the different segments of the sub-nationals population, whether it is male, female, different population brackets, is very, very interesting to explore.
Remo, how about you? Checkout.com has offices, I believe, in both the UAE and Saudi Arabia. How do you think about where to sort of base your people, where to have your sort of hubs, and where you operate?
So it's not an easy question, because obviously we see opportunities in multiple countries, and as Ziad said as well, it's also important to prioritize and decide, obviously, based on the business you're doing, where is the biggest opportunity. And I would also add, obviously, to keep in mind a very long-term view, because you mentioned Egypt as well. We know it's perhaps not attractive as the other two countries we just discussed right now, But if you look at the population and the potential, is definitely in the next 3-5 years is a region where is a country where obviously I would expect to see more and more activity going from there. And we already see a lot of good companies out there. We decided 10 years ago to come to the UAE. I think it was a very obvious choice, still quite brave if you look at the infrastructure. 10 years ago was not great, but obviously our job was also try to support all these players that were expanding. But also we realized very quickly two things. I mean, first of all, that the MENA region is very fragmented. We said this before, and it's very important that obviously you serve consumers, your customers, and for us merchants, they have consumers locally in the home country. And that's why we realized very quickly that it's very important. We need to have local presence in the countries where we want to have a key focus. And second of all, how Saudi Arabia was changing and how they were embracing good innovation and things were moving towards the right direction. Hence why we decided obviously to set up office in Riyadh as well. So obviously today we support both countries locally, but we do also help merchants everywhere else in the GCC. From Bahrain, from Qatar, from Oman, from Egypt, we do business in Kuwait, and including the local payment methods, which is very important to mention for our line of business. Because as we do digital payments, it's also important to understand that in some of these countries, people are not necessarily having a Visa or MasterCard card, but they likely have Mada in Saudi, Kenet in Kuwait, or QPay in Qatar, which is a local scheme, which is regulated and sponsored by the local central banks. And again, it goes back with the fragmentation, which means obviously it's really important to decide in which country you want to focus. Now, what I see is more and more focus in Saudi. We see more company from overseas setting up companies directly in Saudi Arabia. Before, we noticed companies that were setting up first in the UAE, Abu Dhabi or Dubai, and then expanding to Saudi. Now we see company from Asia as well, not only from Europe, coming straight to Saudi Arabia, which obviously it's a good sign that the biggest market in the region is becoming more open. And it's clearly showing in our data as well, because we keep processing volume. We see the processing volume of some of the largest e-commerce in the world. And we do see that Saudi obviously growing at a very, very fast pace.
If you just allow me to come in here to say one of the key things that facilitated those companies coming from outside the region to set up first in Saudi Arabia is the legislation. The Ministry of Foreign Investment, MISA, you can set up a fully owned subsidiary from a foreign holding entity. Those are things that probably, Remo, correct me if I'm wrong, but 10 years ago were not as easy as. So for you guys where, okay, let's go, if you want to open up to the region, let's go to Dubai. But now it became different. And we set up our subsidiary, and it was honestly a smooth experience in terms of the process. You still have a lot of room of improvement, how digital it is, what is needed, and so on. But it is now from legislation perspective, it is doable. It's not a complicated. Before you needed a local partner to set up a Saudi entity, and those were very challenging requirements versus now.
100%. We saw this on our side. Totally agree with Ziad as well. And that's what we mentioned about obviously regulators and legislation moving towards the right direction. We actually were the first UK company with Sagia before MISA, before they got rebranded to set up in 2019. So definitely this has accelerated quite a lot for sure. And we definitely see that obviously as accommodating more and more companies. Plus one.
Gaia, I'd love to bring you in, but in particular, thinking about the sort of the culture of the region. So for companies coming in from North America or Europe or Asia or elsewhere, how important is it to sort of understand the culture of the region and indeed Islam? I mean, Islam is obviously, pulls the whole region together and is sort of creates that sort of cultural continuity. I realize it's not a monolith, but there is a continuity across the region. How important is that, and how different is that for doing business than doing business in Europe or Asia?
Of course, 100%. It's something you would have to consider. I can mention a few points. Of course, that's not going to be exhaustive, but just to start with, up until maybe a couple of years ago, the working week was completely different. And it still is in some areas of the Middle East. The UAE just realigned with the rest of the world using, the Monday to Friday working week. But in Saudi Arabia, for example, in Israel, and even in Sharjah, which is an emirate just north of Dubai, Fridays are still a holiday. So it's considered a weekend. So that's something that just like operationally, obviously, has to be taken into account. It's a deeply religious society. So public religious holidays do affect workflows as well. Just think about Ramadan. It's a month-long festivity. It affects staff and sensitivities at work. So it's something that definitely employers, companies, looking at your client base is definitely something to take into consideration. And then, obviously you mentioned Islam, something that companies operating in the finance space may want to think about is aligning their product to Islamic finance or part of their products. And just to summarize that, it's basically a system of financial laws that follow Islamic laws, basically are compliant to what is called the Sharia. So Islamic laws by which, for example, you wouldn't get interest on your money because money from money for no need is not aligned to the value system of Islam, and investments should be directed into asset classes that are sort of approved by Islamic standards. So definitely no gambling, alcohol, or any other asset classes, tobacco, that are not that do not follow these standards. And then as a final note, I would probably say this is very timely, but the Middle East, it's a region that is currently facing a conflict. So I think that also, requires a different sensitivity for new businesses operating in this region in terms of, having that kind of approach to how they operate, the communication strategies, the staff they hire. And it's something, obviously, that has to be taken into account.
Indeed. Thank you for saying that, because we're having this conversation as if there wasn't a huge conflict going on between Israel and Palestine, and of course your own country, Lebanon, being increasingly pulled into that. So,
and Sudan and Yemen and several countries where the situation has been stagnant for quite a few years.
Indeed, there has been too much conflict.
It's a hot region from all kinds of aspects.
in a good way and a bad way. Yes, indeed. What about? And I don't wish to gloss over that, but we're not going to solve Middle East peace in this podcast. What about finding talent? Maybe I'll come to you on that one, Remo. I mean, it's great when you've got a place like Dubai that's a sort of hotbed of fintech activity, but also it means presumably that it's quite hard to find really good developers or really good designers or really good product people or whatever, because there's 50 other or 100 other companies trying to hire those exact same people. How challenging is it finding talent? And to the point we were talking about earlier, particularly sort of homegrown talent, Emiratis or Yemenis or Egyptians or other people from the region.
It is definitely challenging. At the same time, I'm telling you, year by year is getting easier, because I think on one hand, it's also becoming this region more attractive for expats to come, not only UAE, but also Saudi. And we as a global company also, we have an opportunity to let potentially employees to relocate from other regions. I know we recently have somebody from Saudi, from France, from our Paris office, they moved to Riyadh. We have some people from the UK office that came to the UAE. So we always focus on obviously trying to have homegrown talents, but also try to get people I wouldn't say necessarily straight fresh from the university, but like young talents. At the same time, we will always attract people from multiple regions. They want to spend some time here. And also we notice, what I notice also over the years, that people tend to come, I'll come to Dubai for 2-3 years before I move on. And then they end up staying there for a long time. One of them is me. 10 years, I'm still there.
You need a pension.
To leave. And I need a pension. I'm waiting for Ziad to come up with a good plan for me.
You're welcome.
Have you hit your golden visa yet?
That's actually another good point that Gaia is mentioning. The overall government has been supporting also people to stay longer by introducing the golden visa, which allows to specific jobs to get the permission to work for 10 years. and not necessarily attached to a specific employer, which used to be a challenge in the past. So it definitely obviously shows that, also the government wants people to stay for longer and to call UAE home rather than just transitioning there from one place to another.
So last quick big question perhaps for you, Ziad. One of the obvious ways to sort of overcome some of these challenges of culture and talent and so on is partnerships. And you talked earlier about how one of the partners in your own company is from Saudi Arabia and you're from Lebanon and so on. How important are forming partnerships with other companies as a sort of strategy to enter the market? Can you imagine for your own business or other businesses potentially partnering with companies in different countries across the region to sort of expand your reach?
So tapping on to the cultural nuances, doing partnership as well is different. It's done differently from one culture to another. For example, you want to have a partnership in Saudi Arabia, you need to meet the counterparties, you need to align with them. It doesn't happen easily. Let's set up a Zoom call, for example. So I always share this as a story that I've been traveling consistently to Saudi Arabia to grow our footprint there, and I usually go on like a schedule, like every month, 1 week, 10 days, and often my wife asks me, "Do you have a schedule?" And I tell her, "No, not yet." She says, "Why are you traveling?" I said, "Once you are there, you call people, you tell them I'm around, let's grab coffee, let's meet, this happens." While, for example, when I used to set up my trips to London, I could have scheduled them 2 months before the trip. And then I can justify to my wife why I'm traveling to London. So the point is that you need to understand how even you set up meetings. If someone ghosts you and doesn't answer your WhatsApp, it doesn't mean... And no hard feelings, but this, there are little things on day to day that you need to deal with them. It's completely different, and this goes to partnership. How do you partner? How do you align? How do you come to the partnership? Do you want to really hit and run, or you want to build something long term? And this is very unique. And again, for me being Lebanese, I've had a lot of Lebanese people in my family worked in Saudi Arabia and the region, and my parents and. You get to understand it differently, and you get to embrace it differently. I think the key point is that understanding culture, local culture, whether it is from Islamic perspective or non-Islamic perspective. So Gaia spoke about Islamic finance and Sharia compliant opportunities or Sharia compliant investments, but you tend to see even people who are not strictly Sharia compliant, they want Sharia friendly opportunities. Let's put it this way. So don't pitch for them an opportunity to back a gambling business or an army or weapon, for example, warehouse, something like this. So the point is Sharia friendly or ethical friendly or even cultural friendly, understanding how the schedule in Ramadan, it needs a dedicated podcast about how you manage your schedule in Ramadan in Saudi Arabia. It's very, very, very different.
Notice.
Staying up till 6 a.m. and starting afternoon, but then business happens.
Tough.
Actually, business happens. And for someone coming out from a different region, say, why would I stay till 3 a.m., 4 a.m. to have suhoor, but maybe I might be closing deal. I don't want this. This is not part of my office hours. But just go enjoy it, have a good food and make a deal happen. If you accept those things and you go in an open-minded approach, it's different. I want to say as well, Jeddah is different than Riyadh, Khobar is different than Riyadh, and Jeddah, Dubai is different than Abu Dhabi, and as Gaia mentioned, Sharjah is different as well. So would you call someone to say, let's have a meeting on Friday morning, and Friday he has prayers and he's going to prepare himself for the prayers? He won't accept it. So I think really it needs local understanding, and it's not difficult to get this understanding, honestly.
So yeah, I was empathizing so much when you mentioned your schedule being completely empty until you land, because as a producer, I face this constantly. We get sent out there for big productions, and my entire interview schedule is TBC, and it's what we call the inshallah mentality, right? It may happen, it may not happen, but you gotta believe it, push until the end, and you may get the interview, that meeting, but yeah, you really have to trust the process.
Exactly. And then when someone tells you, please send me that document, And then you get to a point where your AI can conclude that he's not going to look into it. He's just saying it because for the face of it's like he doesn't want to turn you down. So I fully agree.
All right, we need to wrap this call up, unfortunately. So I'm going to ask all three of you one last question, which is, what one piece of advice would you give to somebody who was looking to sort of expand an existing company into at least one market in the Middle East? If you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be? Gaia, I'm going to come to you first. What one piece of advice would you give someone looking to expand into the Middle East?
I think we covered pretty much them all. I think the cultural piece is probably the biggest one. So, having probably familiarize yourself and your business with the region first before, setting yourself out there, because it's a big change. It's not to be taken for granted. And I guess many people get attracted by the capital and the growth opportunities without having done the due homework before.
Thank you. Remo?
I will probably go with get ready for the diversity, and obviously you need to be agile and flexible to adapt to the changes here. By the way, I'm 100% keen for Ramadan follow-up podcast. I have a lot of stories about 1 o'clock in the morning meeting to discuss with all of you if you're interested.
All in.
But essentially, it's definitely important to make sure that people understand that MENA is a big region when it comes to digital payments specifically. It's very fragmented. The cultural nuances is very different. It's also a region that moves very, very quickly. And this diversity needs to be kept in account. I see a lot of companies adapting this very well. Equally, many companies failing from that point of view when they just copy-paste.
And Ziad?
I second what Gaia said and what Remo said. I think if you allow me to direct the message to people who are outside the MENA region, like from Europe or America, don't parachute your solution or think like as a way it worked in the US or European market, it will work in the MENA region. Go in with certain thesis, try to have a lot of conversations, validation, and understand how it can be derived as well locally. And you just need to go and sit and hear people and understand how they think and how they make decisions and their behavior. I think that's the way I followed it, and that's the way Vendor followed it, and that's why we ended up as well, was we were able to attract a local co-founder to join the effort, and he saw like really this is very exciting that it is not only coming to parachute from London to Saudi Arabia a solution, that we are deriving that solution or building that solution from the region as well with the support of whatever you have in the UK and London ecosystem.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your fantastic insights. Thank you so much. That wraps up today's discussion. Thank you all for joining me. Where can people find out more about you? Gaia, where can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Well, I already mentioned our show, Horizons, so watch that on Bloomberg TV, weekdays at 8 a.m. Dubai time. Also, my work is on LinkedIn, and for those who still wander around X or Twitter, how you call it nowadays, on the platform at Gaia Lamperti.
Thank you. Remo?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Very excited to be. Thanks for joining. Thanks for inviting me today.
And Ziad, where can people find out more about you?
So personally, I'm on LinkedIn, Ziad Mabsout, and for the company, Vendor.com, and we have our app on the Apple Store and Google Store if they are keen to know more, but LinkedIn could be the easiest one.
And you can find me, Benjamin Ensor, on LinkedIn, and you can find out about the work the team is doing at 11fs.com. So thank you all very much for listening. If you like what you heard, please do follow our podcast. Please let us know what you'd like to hear about in future shows. If you want to join the conversation, find us on social media. Just search for 11fs or Fintech Insider, or email us at podcasts@11fs.com. Thank you all so much. Thank you again to my three guests. Goodbye.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and LifeLock has tips to protect your identity. Use strong passwords, set up multi-factor authentication, report phishing, and update the software on your devices. And for comprehensive identity protection, let LifeLock alert you to suspicious uses of your personal information. LifeLock also fixes identity theft, guaranteed or your money back. Stay smart, safe, and protected with a 30-day free trial at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.